You know what I want? I want to talk
Hello and welcome to the Rapcast. I'm your host, Samson Folk, and with Game 1 of the finals looming large, I'm very pleased to have on a terrific writer for ESPN The Magazine and ESPN.com, the co-host of Pack Your Knives, the Top Chef podcast, and beloved Kawhi-Lowry appreciator, Kevin Arnovitz. Thanks so much for coming in, Kevin. How are you?
Sam, thanks very much for having me. I'm well.
Yeah, I guess the first thing I want to talk about, just to jump into it right away, your piece after Game 5 of the Eastern Conference Finals, you said, in many respects, the Raptors are beating the Bucks with the brand of scrambling, quick to collapse, quick to recover defense that had become Milwaukee's calling card. With Leonard taking the lead, Toronto accounts for Bucks superstar Giannis Antetokounmpo with multiple bodies, help coming from all directions, weak side, baseline, perimeter. KD won't be available in Game 1, so I'm wondering how you think the Raptors' aforementioned defensive feats will carry over to defending the likes of Draymond, Steph, and Clay, particularly when it comes to tracking Steph and Clay's energetic relocation off ball.
Yeah, I mean, look, they're being presented with a problem that is much deeper than anything Milwaukee presents, and Milwaukee's a great offensive team and has been all season. This is a different quality of offense, right? And it's not just the relocation, right? It's the splits, and the truth of the matter is that I think that trio in Golden State have gotten. They can run actions with blindfolds at this point. I mean, in terms of just sheer IQ as a triumvirate, they're unrivaled. So, half the time what you're seeing is essentially just a read. It's not anything you could even script as a defense. So, I mean, I have a great deal of trust in the Raptors defense. I think they have a collective intelligence that understands and can kind of pick up on patterns and whatnot, but it's going to be daunting. I mean, the Warriors play with a rhythm that is almost designed to punish teams that put themselves in rotation, that over scramble. Your willingness can actually kill you. I mean, one of the things that's just, to me, not unlike the Spurs of their prime, like the Warriors make you pay for good decisions, not even bad decisions. And that's what makes them different.
I think it's going to be really interesting. I talked to Michael Pina yesterday about this matchup, and he seemed to think that Kyle-Lowry would be on Steph Curry, and I was of the mind that Kyle-Lowry would be guarding Klay Thompson. Which do you think it'll be?
I could see them cross-matching the guards, just because with Danny you get a little more length, and the problem is obviously Kyle's height. So Clay's 6'7", and you're talking about coming around a screen and shooting over a guy. So I think you might be right. I would guess maybe Danny starts on Kyle. I mean, the question is also, given given the events of the last week, at what point, Danny played 13 minutes in game 6 the other night.
Yeah,
I forget. But I suspect you'll see. I tend to probably think you're right, but nothing would surprise me. Also, I haven't even looked at the matchups. I don't know how Kyle and Steph have matched up over the years. I mean, I think, that's one consideration. Kyle's really good at fighting over, and I think obviously if you're looking at Steph, and it's really about you can ill afford, not to basically give him any sort of breathing room on high screens. Is Kyle a guy who can kind of stick his arm in there and sort of and recover really quickly? And that's the question.
So do you think that the Raptors would opt to have, well, maybe there's obviously going to be a mix. If there's a guy like Steph Curry, you want to throw quite a few different looks at him, but is the game plan then maybe something that you think would be valuable for the Raptors to try and push Steph down into the mid-range and see if he can create from there where the Raptors' length kind of cuts off passing lanes rather than having him operate from the top of the arc?
I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think you have to. I think it's interesting. I know Terry Stotts might take issue with it, but I do think you need to have your bigs up pretty. If not, obviously you can't have them dangling out there on the perimeter, especially if it's Mark. But I do think that up to touch is going to be you saw what he did when you give him a modicum of space, and I just I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, it hasn't been in their nature to trap, but I wouldn't be surprised if you see a little bit of that. I mean, obviously, you create those 4-on-3 situations, which they're so good at exploiting. But I think one of the things that we've learned about Nick Nurse is you'll probably see a variety of things. Like, look, I wouldn't be shocked if Kawhi doesn't spend 12 possessions on Steph in each game. Like, I think that's well within the realm of possibility. Will they switch? It's something they did against Milwaukee, but I think that was largely kind of to react to Brook Lopez's game one. And in contrast, the Warriors don't have bigs who can really shoot. So, I'd be inclined to say, the switch at least sort of keeps a body in front of Steph. And that might be something they opt for. I mean, I don't really know what to expect. I mean, it's going to be interesting. We'll know pretty quickly, though.
Yeah, game one is going to be really intriguing, obviously, because we've been doing Cavs Warriors for so long, and we finally have a new matchup to talk about. So, obviously, the high screen and roll in the middle of the floor, trying to target Gasol is probably something the Warriors are going to do. But as far as split action, you were talking about the actions they run. They could do them blindfolded. And the Raptors are a very smart defense. Do you think that the Warriors will go away from those actions a little more to try and go into targeting Gasol?
No, I don't. I mean, one thing we know about Steve Kerr is he's not a guy who's susceptible to very much mismatched basketball. I mean, that's not to say they won't target. I mean, I think, look, they're going to run screen and roll because they run screen and roll because they're really good because they have Steph Curry, right? Like, that's it. But I don't think this is a team that, and it's part of their DNA, and particularly when Durant's not on the floor, I think this is especially true, is they're just not a team that's going to go away from their stuff because, this is not Mark Jackson basketball, right? Like, I don't think it's like it just sort of, working the mismatch is just not something that's really part of their constitution. It's not part of their philosophy. And again, that's not to say that they won't run pick and roll against Gasol but they run pick and roll against everybody, irrespective of they think, whether that big is, a defender who can hold his own against perimeters like Al Horford or whether it's Marc Gasol.
Yeah. I guess going to the other side, the Raptors, the last two rounds, there's been a lot of intimidating rim protection in Embiid, Giannis, and Lopez. And especially Embiid and Giannis. Lopez is good when he's got his feet set in the paint and working from there. But Draymond is a very different type of defender. And there's a lot more, I guess, tenacity and guile when talking about how he plays. And he's one of the smartest defenders we've seen in the league for a very, very long time. What happens to Kyle Lowry's sneaky free throw attempts, how he was able to will himself to the line against the Bucks, and Kawhi Leonard's offense at the rim? How do you think Draymond affects that when they have to negotiate the space in there while he's occupying it?
I mean, it's going to be difficult. And the truth is that, the Raptors didn't do a great job of finding shots at close range against the Bucks. I mean, the Bucks did a, reasonably good job defensively the entire series, even in the loss. And the Raptors generated very little at the rim. As you say, Green is a different kind of rim protector, although he is undoubtedly a rim protector. I mean, by every definition of what does a rim protector do, deters and changes shots at close range. Check. Is somebody who can kind of follow you and shade you all the way to the cup and still disrupt the shot even from the top of the floor. Check. He is a rim defender. I mean, this is where Kawhi's, and I'm obviously not a mid-range game guy, but this is where Kawhi's sort of pull-up artistry is just so important, and just how much offense they can generate in possessions where, for whatever reason, the defensive scheme doesn't really allow for opportunity. Well, okay, now you've got the ball in Kawhi Leonard's hands. Or, what I love is what, the way the Raptors sort of later in the Bucks series sort of started going to Kawhi second and third. Not at the outset of every possession, but kind of running some action, with Kyle, or for that matter, Fred, and then ultimately getting it to Kawhi after sort of the defense had been scrambled or at least compromised or kind of lured to the strong side of the floor. But look, it's going to be really tough, and people forget just how good defensively the Warriors are when they're motivated.
Yeah. Well, you were talking about attacking after the defense has been scrambled. Norm Powell, he had a big part of that Bucks series. And generally when he gets to attack in these linear ways where he just goes from A to B, he's quite good. He's almost elite when he's going to the rim. But if he's going back to Draymond, Does Norm Powell, and I know this is maybe for a guy who you've been in Toronto for a while now. Norm Powell, he was good, but how is he going to do if he's attacking a scramble defense, but instead of, a Bucks defense that's waiting at the rim or closing out, it's the Warriors? How do, let's say, Fred VanVleet, Norm Powell, how do they come off the bench and have the same type of effect?
I mean, it's hard to project until we see sort of how. I mean, I'm not even sure what the Warriors are going to do rotationally. I mean, that's going to be an interesting question too. Obviously, Kerr has been going deep into the bench. Does he shorten the rotation for this series? How is Iguodala feeling? Here's another question: when Norm and Fred are on the floor, are the Warriors going to be small, or are they going to be big? Are they going to be is Draymond going to be the 5-man if he's on the floor at all? I mean, it's hard to project what guys like Norm and Fred do until we know how they're going to be used rotationally when they're going to be on the floor and what the Warriors are going to do. It's just there's no way to possibly predict. I don't know who's Norm's matchup is going to be. I don't know. Where is he going to supplant Danny in the rotation essentially after the starting 6 minutes? I don't know. And so it's extremely hard to know.
I guess let's talk about Danny then. And maybe, Fred, he shot 14-17 from 3 in those last 3 games. Danny has been in a terrible slump, even though he has a long history of being a great shooter, especially in the NBA Finals as well. You've covered the Spurs at times. You've been with Toronto for a while now, at least recently. Being around Danny, do you think that he's able to get it back and that he'll come back into the series and start shooting well from the corners again even, and then work his way above the break, something along those lines?
I have no idea. I mean, I don't mean to be flip about it. Like, this is sort of the mystery. It's like going to Vegas and, kind of, pulling up to a blackjack table and say, hey, is that dealer going to suck out again? Like, I don't know. Like, what we know is this guy was a 46% 3-point shooter during the regular season. And so let's reduce that for the playoffs because you're up against a really good defense and the stakes are there and teams don't, dog it the way they do in January when they've got nothing to play for. So let's bring that down to 39%, and I'm just throwing something out there. I mean, this is the game of probabilities we play. Like, we know that Danny Green has a history of hitting big shots in big games. We know that he's been on the big stage. So, whatever might impact a shooter of less experience who hasn't enjoyed those moments, do those afflict Danny? We would think not. So it's just like it's to me it's senseless in trying to predict what a shooter is going to do. Like, I don't think the quality of his shots, I mean, there were a few rushed kind of, he got caught with some flaming bags in that Milwaukee series, but I just think that trying to predict whether Danny Green's going to be closer to the 46% guy he was during the regular season or the, whatever it is in this postseason, certainly in the last series, he was abominable. Like, I don't know. Like, there's just no way to predict something like that. I mean, anybody who says they can predict what Danny Green's going to do is essentially saying, I'm going to walk up to a blackjack table and just tell you, what the dealer's going to draw on the next 6 hands. Like, I just think these are kind of mysteries of probability that, can be determined by good defenses or bad defenses. But I mean, Danny's just not a guy who takes, quote, bad shots. I mean, I don't like when he's dribbling because he's just not, but I'm saying in terms of the 3-point stuff, I mean, the quality and texture and sort of variety of shots he takes from beyond the arc are pretty much, those have been the same shots that the guy's been taking for 7 or 8 or 9 years.
So I guess moving away from, I've asked you a couple questions that might be a bit predictive then. Outside of something that's prediction-based, what do you think is the most intriguing aspect of this series? Something that you don't have to walk up to a blackjack dealer and ask, hey, is it going to be good or bad? What's the thing that you know for certain is going to shake out that one team is going to have or one team won't have?
It's going to be interesting to see how I think the Raptors distribute their offense. They're an interesting team, right? Like, they have, they run these, and you saw, and they did some beautiful stuff in the latter stages of the Milwaukee series where, you had this sort of two-sided action, right? Like, you would have, Kyle and Pascal running a pick and roll with kind of Kawhi, on the wing on the opposite side, on the off ball side, and you would have, and then you also have, you have Marc Gasol working, at the elbow, which I love. I mean, kind of, Memphis was never a great offensive team in that sort of grit and grind era, but boy, Conley and Gasol could do some really beautiful stuff that would open up even with all the limitations they had on the floor. Guys like Tony Allen, kind of, who didn't need to be guarded, and it was like beautiful to see. And you remember those two in Game 5, I think it was, those backdoor elements that they ran with Kawhi and Mark, which were just total reads. And so you have this sort of what I call that kind of the high IQ honors class that they run. And then you, of course, have just kind of Kawhi offense, which might probably be more efficient in a cruel way. But it's going to be so interesting to see how they try to compromise the Warriors. Like I think there are times where things get gummy in the Raptors half-court offense, at least in the postseason. And you just kind of go to Kawhi for a few possessions. And then it's sort of like, can they get anything out of sort of what I call conventional offense? Those screen and rolls. How do they use Pascal? I mean, Pascal's such an interesting player, lethal from the corners. You don't really want him shooting above the break. He can, against the right moment in the defense, he can find seams, and he's just vicious as a sort of dribble driving, and he's such a peculiar weapon because I wouldn't say he's not well integrated into the offense, because he is, and we've seen actions, and he's put in positions to succeed, but are there moments where he improvisationally, the way he did in the kind of the Orlando series, can just be used lethally, and especially if Draymond's attention's elsewhere. I don't know who Draymond will guard. I imagine, that's going to be an interesting question, is, who is on, in terms of Iguodala and Green, like who takes turns on Kawhi? Are there opportunities for Pascal because of that? Can you tilt the floor so that Pascal on the weak side corner can just, he can get 6 shots out of 100 possessions out there and hit 3 of them, which is just great offense. It's just sort of how they distribute their offense is going to be, to me, so interesting to watch. And we'll know in Game 1 what it looks like.
Yeah. Well, especially considering nobody had more elbow touches over the past, I think, 3 years than Marc Gasol when he was with Memphis, and to see if they use him as a conduit for the elbow offense or the 5-out offense. And then you have Kawhi's compartmentalized type of offense away from Toronto's, then you have the conventional offense you talked about. If I can get one more question in from you. Yeah. The city of Toronto, it's been a talking point from Masai Ujiri to just fans as well, where everybody's very proud to have the NBA Finals there. You've been there for some time now. What's been the most enjoyable aspect of your time in Toronto?
It's such a fantastic city. Like, having essentially, I think I mentioned this on a podcast. Like, I joined a gym at the University of Toronto, like the Hard House. I don't stay downtown. I think where a lot of the sports writers stay. I stay up on Bloor, just so I can enjoy the neighborhood life. And I'm right there on the 1 and the 2 trains, and it's kind of this beautiful combination of cosmopolitanism, but what I like about it is I find it very efficient. It's just when you start kind of living in a city day to day, and you start taking the trains and walking the sidewalks and using the running trails, and in the Lower Don Valley, or just kind of walking the streets, you just the parks I use, you kind of get a sense for, is the city well managed, and it's efficient. And to say nothing of the dining options, and just that I think it is fundamentally a neighborhood city. And it's unfortunate, I think so many people kind of get caught in the entertainment district, which is fine. But I think if you really want to kind of see where where the real magic is, you can kind of go out to, I rented a car between, I think, 6 and 7 of the Philly series, and spent the evening out in Scarborough and Markham, and just because I love the food, and it's just it's such an interesting, and it's kind of a cliche to say a mosaic, but it is. I think it's North America's most cosmopolitan city, and I think that just just even getting to wander up and down Bloor, which I just did a million times, just because it was my street. It's just kind of, that's where I stayed, and that's where the laundry place I found was, and you wander into the BMV Books and picked up a paperback for $8, and that's where my coffee joint was. That's what the crappy 7-Eleven is at Spadina. That's the worst 7-Eleven in Toronto. But it's mine. But it's mine, damn it. It's just kind of, I just absolutely love the time. And it kind of just still kind of scratching the surface. Like there's probably more to explore, and I didn't do enough of the arts. I wanted to get to the documentary film festival, and in late April, and I just didn't. The dates didn't really work well for the series, and so like arts is a place that I'd want to do next postseason if I'm up there again, and the way I kind of did food this series, but it's just such a fantastic livability is hard in a metropolitan area above 6 million people. Like it just is. Like we aren't very good at it, and somehow Toronto is really good at it. And like man, my last Sunday in town, and that first really nice day, I took the ferry across in the morning to the islands, and then ended up running for 5 miles, along the lake, and that was just really. Yeah, it's one of my favorite Sunday mornings ever. And like, oh, by the way, and the ferry runs every 15 minutes, and you're back, and like I was in my hotel room by noon, and at lunch at 1. So it's just again, it's sort of this. It's vast, but also just manageable, and I just think it's a rare quality a lot of cities don't have, and because it's just hard to produce. It's hard to have a gazillion people of different origins and backgrounds and industries sort of cohabitating a place and making it run efficiently, and it's clean, and people generally treat each other the right way and are polite. And oh, by the way, we have all this food, and it's affordable, relatively speaking, I think, to a lot of big American metropolises on the coasts. That was the other kind of revelation. And anyway, it's just been great. Like I just absolutely like my love affair with Toronto. I've always enjoyed dropping in for 3 or 4 nights, but when you sort of kind of set up shop there for an entire postseason, you really just kind of you dig deeper, and it's just fantastic.
Yeah, neighborhood city is a very apt way to describe it. I like that one a lot. Before you go, you're a busy guy. I suggest you tell the people where to find you on Twitter, etc. And
don't find me on Twitter. Don't find me on Twitter. Don't find anybody on Twitter. Get off Twitter. Everybody should get off Twitter.
That's so funny.
Because it's a terrible place for terrible people. It's I don't know. Like I'm here and there. You can see me on ESPN.com. I think the bulk of my stuff has been published. I've got a few more things in the works coming up, I guess. Something on the Warriors. I have some Kawhi stuff coming up, I think, in the next few weeks. Either even during the postseason or after it. And but yeah, check it out, ESPN.com. I should say that I do use Twitter to disseminate my work, but that's it. I offer no commentary, and if I ignore you, I apologize. I don't check my mentions very often, and try to avoid it. But if you have a golden retriever, I will follow you on Instagram. I mean, that is something I can promise. So in terms of my social media usage, that's pretty much the crux of it.
Good. Well, you guys heard it there first. If you want to go introduce yourself to some of his work, his Twitter's there, but don't expect any back and forth. Kevin, thank you so much for coming on, man. It's been a blast. And thank you for that glowing endorsement of Toronto and talking about the team with me.
Oh, it's been great. Thanks so much.
Yeah. And for the listeners, have a blessed day and goodbye.